and welcome to another tutorial from DMC Films. Now today we're going to be looking at preparing unusual surfaces for painting and drawing. Now the surfaces I have today are pieces of slate rock which have been sitting outside for a number of years, and I just brought them out from inside. It was snowing, and so they're very wet and very cold. And the first step will be to dry these off and make sure they're ready to cut. Now when cleaning your surface, you always want to make sure you're pushing away from yourself so you don't get any of the debris on your clothes or in your eyes or anything like that, especially if you're allergic to mold, mildew, or dust. Now that the pieces are clean, what we want to do is make sure we have measurement lines for where we want to cut. Now because this slate was used in roofing, it has holes in it, and we want to make sure that we don't cut across the hole where the slate would splinter or crack. Now because these pieces are very heavy, I do want to cut it down a good bit, but probably not completely, because I do want to have some of the original integrity, piece of the integrity intact. This piece is about 12 inches across, and I can make a standard 9 by 12 pretty easily then. And if you are planning on framing an unusual object such as this, or an unusual material, what you will want to do is make your sizes and measurements to standard frame sizes. Now you wouldn't want something that's like a 3 by 7 or something that wouldn't fit in a frame. And this is a pastel pencil that I'm using. I'm using the pastel pencil mainly because it's, the chalk will give me a clear and bright line, but it will also rub off eventually and clean off pretty nicely. Okay, now I've gone ahead and cut my pieces. Now the reason I didn't show you the actual cutting process is because it was mainly for safety reasons. I didn't want to put my camera out in the cold weather, let alone subject it to all kinds of dust flying up from these things. Now granted, you can find videos on how to cut stone by yourself. It's it's a hardware thing. People cut tile, that kind of thing all the time. The process is pretty much the same. You have a small power circular saw. It's made for cutting stone. You can do that yourself at home. Now, what this video is about is basically prepping the surfaces. Now, what I've done so far, this piece actually isn't too bad. A few of these, the edges of them aren't completely straight. I'll have to go back in and sand those later to make sure they do line up with my dimensions. This piece is actually not too bad, and I think I'll show you how to clean this one up and prime it for use. Now what cutting this does do is it creates a whole lot of dust, so the first thing we want to do is wipe that off one more time just to give it a nice dusted layer. Now before you prime this for use, now one thing you can do is you can leave this unprimed and paint or draw right on top of it. Now the reason I don't recommend doing that is, even though it will retain the stone look, it may rub off over time and it won't have a really sealed, nice surface. So if you do want to retain that look of the stone, I would recommend using a clear gesso or acrylic gel to give you that same look that you need. Upon inspecting this piece, I actually can tell that it's not completely straight, so I think I will pick up another one. Eyeing that one up. Okay, I think this was the piece I was going to do originally, so once again we'll just wipe that off, making sure any of the dust and debris from the cutting process is finished off. And what we have is a nice piece ready to go. Now before we prime this, what we do want to do is make sure that it's clean and disinfected, so I have here just a regular bottle of household disinfectant. You can pick this up at any old local store that you have. Won't cost you any more than it would anybody else. So we just spray that on, clean that off. And this is just the surface. I'm not worried about getting in the grooves or anything. This is just to make sure your initial surface is nice and clean before you decide to prime it. And this will remove any loose dirt or anything that was still on there from the initial cleaning process. And you don't necessarily have to use disinfectant. I mean, I'm sure a wet rag would work, but to make sure any of the anything you might be allergic to is up and off of there. That's probably the way to go. Now you can use a number of things to prime the surface, and one thing you could use is regular acrylic gesso, and that works very well. You can brush that on. What I'll be using today is a product by Golden called Fine Pumice Gel, and this product allows not only a great surface for acrylics, but it also makes a great surface for drawing as well. Now what the Fine Pumice Gel will do is it will actually dry in a slightly translucent to transparent way. And what that'll do for me is that it'll show some of the original gray tones that are still here underneath and show them through. Now one thing that you can do is if you don't like the rough surface that the slate provides, you can sand that down before you prime it. And again, after you sand that down, you want to clean it one more time. So I'm taking my palette knife and this fine pumice gel, and this little bit on my knife right now is probably all you're going to need, because I'm putting it on in a very, very thin way. And when I put it on thin like this, it actually will fill some of those crevices. Just working whatever's on there into the stone. And if you had any debris laying in there, any dirt, whenever you add your primer, that would kind of blend in with your primer and pick up with a brush or a knife, which is why you need to clean that off before you begin priming your surface. And because the whatever primer you're using will have water in it, it will darken the slate surface. But because everything it's just water, so it will dry. Scraping off any of the excess here. And you notice how little I had of that pumice gel, and how much that just with that very thin layer. Excuse me. I was able to coat the surface. At this point I'm just evening things out so I don't have any of these lines in here. So the last thing you want is to have those ridges that show more or less brush strokes and knife strokes. And there we have a complete primed surface. When this dries, it'll be ready to go for painting, drawing, and any other medium that you might want to do. That's all for this tutorial video. For more about prepping surfaces, painting, drawing, the arts, anything like that, stay tuned here to the DMC Films channel here on YouTube. See you guys next time.